What if everything you believed about your family was a lie? In a small, seemingly perfect town, a young girl discovers a dark, hidden world right under her nose. Prepare to challenge your deepest beliefs as we reveal a shocking truth. Love can turn into betrayal in the blink of an eye. Stay with us to uncover Clara's incredible journey of courage and redemption, and by the end, we will share a powerful prayer to bring peace and hope into your life. You won't want to miss a single moment. The soft glow of the nightlight cast gentle shadows on the pastel walls of Clara's bedroom. Clara sat cross-legged on her bed, the silver locket in her hand catching the light. It was a delicate piece, intricately patterned, a treasured memento from her mother. Clara traced its edges with her fingers, trying to remember her mother's soothing voice and comforting embrace. The night had always been a time for stories and lullabies, but since her mother's passing, the darkness had become a harsh reminder of her absence. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she lay back on her pillow, clutching the locket tightly. Her room, once a sanctuary of warmth and love, now felt cold and oppressive, filled with the echoes of memories and an overwhelming sense of loss. Downstairs, the faint sounds of dishes clinking and the low hum of the evening news drifted up. Dona Rosa, the family's longtime housekeeper, was finishing up her chores. Dona Rosa had been a steady presence in Clara's life for as long as she could remember, always there with a kind word or a comforting hug. But even Dona Rosa's warmth couldn't fill the void left by Clara's mother. As the clock struck 10, the house began to settle into its nightly routine. Dona Rosa turned off the kitchen lights and headed to her small room at the back of the house. Before retiring, she always checked on Clara, making sure she was tucked in and as comfortable as possible. "Good night, Minha querida," Dona Rosa whispered, smoothing Clara's hair gently. "Good night, Dona Rosa," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The door closed softly, and Clara was left alone in the dimly lit room. As soon as she was alone, the tears began to flow. At first, it was a soft sob, but soon, it grew into heart-wrenching cries that echoed in the stillness of the night. Clara buried her face in her pillow, trying to stifle the sound, but the sorrow was too overwhelming. Each tear was a release of the pent-up emotions she held back during the day. The loneliness, the confusion, and the fear all came pouring out. Clara's small body shook with the intensity of her sobs, and she felt an emptiness that seemed to grow with every passing second. In his study, Ricardo sat at his desk, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the papers scattered before him. He was deep in thought, trying to focus on his work, but the muffled cries from upstairs reached his ears. With a heavy sigh, he set down his pen and rubbed his temples. Ricardo had always been a man of few words, his stoic demeanor often mistaken for indifference. But tonight, something in his daughter's cries stirred a discomfort within him. Rising from his chair, he made his way up the stairs and stood outside Clara's room for a moment, listening to her sobs. Gently, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. Clara's cries softened as she felt his presence, and she quickly wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. "Clara," Ricardo said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed, "why are you crying?" Clara looked up at him, her eyes red and puffy. She wanted to tell him about the nightmares, about the unbearable loneliness, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she simply shook her head and looked away. Ricardo sighed, reaching out to stroke her hair. "Try to sleep, sweetheart. Everything will be better in the morning." He stood up and left the room, closing the door behind him. Clara watched him go, a sense of unease settling in her chest. There was something about her father's demeanor that seemed distant, almost mechanical. She hugged her pillow tightly, willing herself to fall asleep, but the feeling of unease lingered. Unable to sleep, Clara tossed and turned in her bed. The moonlight streamed through the window, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Suddenly, she heard the creak of footsteps outside her room. Her curiosity piqued, Clara slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the door. Peeking through a crack, she saw her father making his way down the hallway, a determined look on his face. Quietly, she followed him, keeping a safe distance. Ricardo descended the stairs and headed towards the basement door, a place Clara was rarely allowed to enter. Holding her breath, Clara watched as her father unlocked the door and disappeared into the darkness below. She hesitated for a moment before following him, her heart pounding in her chest. The basement was dimly lit, with only a few candles flickering in the corners. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she saw her father standing in the center of the room, surrounded by strange symbols drawn on the floor. Ricardo began to chant softly, his voice low and rhythmic. Clara's eyes widened in shock as she watched him perform a ritual, his movements precise and deliberate. She had no idea what he was doing, but the sight filled her with a sense of dread. Just as she was about to turn and flee, Ricardo's eyes snapped up, locking onto her. Clara froze, her blood running cold. Her father's expression darkened, and he took a step towards her. "What are you doing here, Clara?" he demanded, his voice harsh and unyielding. Trembling, Clara took a step back, her eyes wide with fear. I couldn't sleep," she stammered. "I heard you, and—" Ricardo's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained cold. "You should not be here," he said firmly. "What you saw, you must never speak of it to anyone. Do you understand?" Clara nodded quickly, tears streaming down her face. Ricardo stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If you tell anyone, Clara, bad things will happen. Do you understand?" "Yes, Papa," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I won't tell anyone, I promise." Satisfied, Ricardo nodded and ushered her out of the basement, locking the door behind them. Clara hurried back to her room, her heart still racing. She climbed into bed and pulled the covers over her head, trying to forget what she had seen. But the images of her father's ritual and his chilling threats stayed with her, haunting her dreams. The next morning, Dona Rosa found Clara unusually quiet and withdrawn. The little girl picked at her breakfast, barely eating a bite. Concerned, Dona Rosa knelt beside her and gently lifted her chin. "Clara, minha querida, what's wrong?" she asked softly. "You can tell me anything?" Clara looked into Dona Rosa's kind eyes, but the memory of her father's threat loomed large in her mind. She shook her head and forced a small smile. "I'm just tired," she said. "I had a bad dream." Dona Rosa wasn't convinced, but she didn't press further. Instead, she decided to keep a closer eye on Clara and observe the interactions between her and Ricardo. There was something off, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. As the day went on, Clara retreated further into herself, her mind replaying the events of the previous night. Dona Rosa watched her with growing concern, determined to find out what was troubling the girl. At school, Clara tried to focus on her lessons, but her mind kept drifting back to the basement. She avoided her classmates, choosing to sit alone during lunch. Her teachers noticed her distraction, but attributed it to the recent loss of her mother. During recess, Clara sat under a tree, drawing absent-mindedly in her notebook. Anna, one of her classmates, approached her hesitantly. "Hey, Clara," Anna said softly. "Do you want to play?" Clara looked up, surprised by the kindness in Anna's eyes. She wanted to join her, to feel normal again. But the weight of her secret kept her rooted to the spot. "Maybe later," she said, forcing a smile. Anna nodded and ran off to join the other children. Clara watched her go, feeling a pang of longing. She missed the days when life was simple, when her biggest worry was what game to play next. But those days felt like a distant memory now. That night, Clara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to sleep, but the images of the ritual and her father's stern face refused to fade. When sleep finally came, it was plagued by nightmares. She dreamt of the basement, of dark figures and whispered chants. She saw her father, his eyes cold and unfeeling, performing the ritual over and over again. Clara woke up with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt the familiar sting of tears and buried her face in her pillow, trying to stifle her sobs. Moments later, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Clara, querida, what's wrong?" Dona Rosa's voice was soft and soothing. Clara looked up, her face wet with tears. "It's nothing, Dona Rosa. Just a bad dream." Dona Rosa sat on the edge of the bed and pulled Clara into a comforting embrace. "It's okay, meu anjo. You're safe now." But Clara didn't feel safe. The fear and confusion gnawed at her, making it hard to breathe. She clung to Dona Rosa, finding some solace in her warmth, but the darkness of her father's secret loomed ever larger. The following morning, Dona Rosa was more determined than ever to get to the bottom of Clara's distress. She watched Ricardo closely, noticing the way he avoided Clara's gaze and how his demeanor shifted when he thought no one was watching. During breakfast, she decided to confront him gently. "Senor Ricardo, Clara seems very troubled lately. Do you know if something is bothering her?" Ricardo looked up from his newspaper, his expression unreadable. "She's been through a lot," he said curtly. "It's natural for her to have some difficulties." Dona Rosa nodded, but she wasn't satisfied with his answer. She had been with the family for years and had always been able to sense when something was wrong. Clara's behavior was more than just grief. It was fear. Determined to protect Clara, Dona Rosa decided to start her own investigation. She began by observing Ricardo's routines, paying close attention to his movements and any unusual behavior. She knew it would be dangerous, but her love for Clara gave her the courage she needed. Clara, meanwhile, was determined to understand what was happening. She spent her free time in her mother's old room, searching for clues that might explain her father's strange behavior. It was there, among her mother's belongings, that she found an old, leather-bound diary. The diary was filled with entries about the family's daily life, but as Clara flipped through the pages, she found references to a group her mother had been investigating. The entries became increasingly frantic, describing strange meetings and ominous rituals. One entry, in particular, caught Clara's eye. It was dated just days before her mother's death. "I fear for our safety," it read. "Ricardo has become deeply involved with the order. I must protect Clara at all costs." Clara's heart raced as she read the words. The order. It sounded like the group her father was involved with. She knew she had to find out more, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed someone she could trust. With a newfound resolve, Clara carefully tucked the diary into her backpack. She would take it to school the next day and show it to Anna. Maybe together, they could uncover the truth and find a way to stop whatever her father was planning. As Clara lay in bed that night, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with determination. She would protect herself and Dona Rosa, no matter what it took. Clara sat on her bed with the old, leather-bound diary open on her lap. Her heart raced as she read her mother's words. The handwriting grew more frantic with each entry, detailing strange meetings and ominous rituals. "I fear for our safety," one entry read. "Ricardo has become deeply involved with the order. I must protect Clara at all costs." Clara's hands trembled as she turned the pages. The diary revealed references to an ancient cult seeking supernatural powers through dark rituals. She was horrified to learn that her mother's death was not natural but a result of these sinister activities. Clara avoided her father as much as possible, her newfound knowledge creating a wall of fear and distrust between them. She moved silently through the house, careful to avoid any direct confrontation with Ricardo. Her behavior did not go unnoticed by Dona Rosa, who watched with growing concern. One evening, as Clara sat quietly at the dinner table, Ricardo's eyes met hers. The intensity of his gaze made her look away quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. The tension in the room was palpable, and Dona Rosa decided it was time to intervene. "Clara, have you been sleeping well?" Dona Rosa asked gently, breaking the silence. Clara hesitated, then nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "Yes, Dona Rosa," she lied. Dona Rosa wasn't convinced. After dinner, she pulled Clara aside, her voice soft but firm. "Minha querida, you can tell me anything. Are you sure nothing is wrong?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she remembered her father's threat. "I'm fine." Dona Rosa's instincts told her that something was terribly wrong. She began to observe Ricardo more closely, noting every small detail. One morning, as she was doing the laundry, she found a robe belonging to Ricardo with strange, dark stains and an unfamiliar symbol embroidered on the inside. The symbol sent a chill down her spine. She had seen it before, in one of Clara's drawings. The realization that Ricardo might be involved in something sinister made her blood run cold. Determined to protect Clara, Dona Rosa decided to investigate further, discreetly searching for more clues around the house. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her mother's grave might hold more answers. One afternoon, she visited the cemetery alone, carrying her mother's diary. She knelt beside the grave, tracing the letters of her mother's name etched into the stone. As she read through the diary again, she found more references to the order and the rituals. One entry mentioned a hidden compartment in her mother's gravestone where important documents were kept. Clara's heart pounded as she carefully searched the grave marker, eventually finding a small, hidden latch. With trembling hands, she opened it and found a sealed envelope. Inside the envelope were letters detailing her mother's findings about the cult and her fears for their safety. Clara felt a mix of sorrow and determination as she read the words. She knew she had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Ricardo had noticed Clara's increasing distance and suspected she was investigating his activities. He became more vigilant, watching her closely and limiting her interactions with others. His behavior grew more controlling and authoritarian, making Clara feel even more trapped. One night, Ricardo confronted Clara in the hallway. "What have you been doing, Clara?" he demanded, his voice low and threatening. Clara's heart raced, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "Nothing, Papa. Just schoolwork." Ricardo's eyes narrowed. "You know what happens if you disobey me," he said, his voice dripping with menace. Clara nodded, her fear palpable. She knew she had to be more careful than ever. Clara needed someone she could trust. During lunch at school, she confided in Anna, her closest friend. "Anna, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to tell anyone." Anna nodded, her eyes wide with concern. "I promise, Clara. What's wrong?" Clara took a deep breath and explained everything: her mother's diary, the rituals, and her father's threats. Anna listened in shock, but her resolve strengthened as Clara spoke. "We need to find more information. Maybe the school library has something," Anna suggested. Grateful for her friend's support, Clara felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they planned to visit the library after school. After school, Clara and Anna headed to the library. They searched through old books and archives, looking for any mention of the order or similar cults. Hours passed, but they finally found a dusty old book that mentioned a group with the same symbol Clara had seen. The book detailed the cult's history, their rituals, and the dark powers they sought. Clara's hands shook as she read about the sacrifices they believed were necessary to gain supernatural abilities. The more they read, the more they realized the danger they were in. "We have to stop him," Anna said, her voice filled with determination. "We need proof and help from someone who can do something about this." Clara nodded, feeling a mix of fear and resolve. They copied important pages from the book and decided to show them to a trusted teacher. Back at home, the tension continued to grow. Ricardo's behavior became increasingly erratic and aggressive. He questioned Clara constantly, his paranoia evident. Clara and Dona Rosa walked on eggshells, trying to avoid his wrath. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Ricardo slammed his fist down, making the dishes rattle. "Why are you so quiet, Clara?" he demanded. "What are you hiding?" Clara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "Nothing, Papa. I'm just tired." Ricardo's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. Clara glanced at Dona Rosa, who gave her a reassuring nod. They both knew they had to be cautious and plan their next steps carefully. Dona Rosa could no longer stay silent. She decided to confront Ricardo, hoping to protect Clara. One night, after Clara had gone to bed, she approached Ricardo in the study. "Señor Ricardo, we need to talk," she said firmly. Ricardo looked up from his papers, his eyes cold. "What is it, Rosa?" Dona Rosa took a deep breath. "I know something is wrong. Clara is terrified, and I've seen the strange symbols and stains on your clothes. What are you involved in?" Ricardo's face darkened with rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he snarled. "Stay out of my business, or you'll regret it." Dona Rosa stood her ground. "I won't let you hurt Clara. If you do, I'll go to the police." Ricardo's eyes flashed with anger, but he said nothing more. Dona Rosa knew she had made herself a target, but she was determined to protect Clara at any cost. Clara and Dona Rosa knew they had to escape before things got worse. They began to secretly gather supplies and plan their route. Clara continued to investigate, hoping to find more evidence to expose her father. One afternoon, Clara found a hidden compartment in her mother's desk. Inside was a letter addressed to her, written by her mother before she died. The letter detailed everything her mother had discovered about the order and warned Clara to be careful. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she read her mother's words. She knew she had to be brave and protect herself and Dona Rosa. With renewed determination, she carefully packed the letter and other important documents. As night fell, Clara and Dona Rosa went over their plan one last time. They would leave during the night, when Ricardo was least likely to notice. They had a small window of opportunity, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. Clara and Dona Rosa moved through the house with an air of calculated calmness, gathering supplies for their escape. They knew Ricardo's vigilance had increased, so every action had to appear ordinary. Clara discreetly packed a small bag with clothes, her mother's diary, and the envelope of letters she found at the grave. Dona Rosa gathered food and essential items, hiding them in places Ricardo wouldn't notice. As they prepared, the bond between them grew stronger. They moved with a silent understanding, their shared determination giving them strength. The plan was to leave in the middle of the night, under the cover of darkness, when Ricardo would be least alert. While searching through her mother's desk one last time, Clara found a hidden compartment. Inside was another letter, this one written just days before her mother's death. The letter detailed the final steps her mother had taken to protect Clara and revealed more about the Order's rituals and their sinister goals. The letter also contained a map of the house, marking the locations of hidden passages and escape routes. Clara's heart pounded as she realized her mother had prepared for this possibility. She quickly shared the letter with Dona Rosa, who nodded grimly. "This is our key," Dona Rosa said. "We must follow your mother's plan." Ricardo's suspicions grew with each passing day. He noticed the subtle changes in Clara and Dona Rosa's behavior and became increasingly paranoid. He began to patrol the house at odd hours, checking rooms and questioning Clara about her activities. One evening, as Clara was reading in her room, Ricardo barged in without knocking. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of deceit. Clara's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Just reading, Papa." Ricardo narrowed his eyes but found nothing amiss. "Remember, Clara," he said menacingly, "I'll always know if you're hiding something." As he left, Clara let out a shaky breath. She knew they had to move quickly. Clara confided in Anna about their escape plan and showed her the map and letters. Anna, horrified by the revelations, promised to help. She managed to convince a trusted teacher, Mr. Silva, to get involved. Mr. Silva, a kind and perceptive man, had always looked out for his students. When Anna explained Clara's situation, he immediately offered his assistance. "I'll call the police and explain everything," Mr. Silva assured them. "You two need to get out as soon as possible. Stay safe and wait for our signal." Clara and Anna hugged tightly, and Clara felt a surge of hope. With Mr. Silva's help, they had a real chance of escaping and exposing Ricardo's crimes. The night had fallen, and the house was cloaked in silence. Clara and Dona Rosa moved swiftly and quietly, following the map's directions to the hidden passage in the basement. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as they descended the creaky stairs. Just as they reached the basement door, it swung open violently. Ricardo stood there, his face twisted with rage. "Going somewhere?" he snarled, blocking their path. Dona Rosa stepped forward, shielding Clara with her body. "Leave her alone, Ricardo. Let us go." Ricardo laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You think you can just leave? You belong to the Order now, Clara. There's no escape." The air was thick with tension as Ricardo advanced on them. Clara felt a surge of courage and stepped out from behind Dona Rosa. "Why, Papa? Why are you doing this?" Ricardo's expression softened for a moment, but his resolve hardened again. It's for power, Clara. For the order. Your mother didn't understand, but you will. You're part of this legacy. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Mama tried to protect me from you. She knew you were dangerous. Ricardo's face twisted with fury. She was weak. But you, Clara, you have potential. As he reached out to grab her, Dona Rosa intervened, pushing Clara behind her. Run, Clara, she shouted. Get help. Clara hesitated, torn between staying to help Dona Rosa and running for safety. Ricardo lunged at Dona Rosa, who fought back with surprising strength. Go, Clara. Dona Rosa screamed as she struggled to hold Ricardo off. With tears streaming down her face, Clara turned and fled, following the map through the hidden passage. She could hear the sounds of the struggle behind her, but she forced herself to keep moving. Dona Rosa's sacrifice gave her the chance to escape, and she couldn't waste it. As Clara navigated the hidden passage, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Fear gripped her, but she continued, hoping it was Mr. Silva and the police. Suddenly, the passage opened up to a small room, and she was met by Mr. Silva and two police officers. Clara! Mr. Silva exclaimed, rushing to her side. Are you all right? Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. Ricardo, he's fighting Dona Rosa. We need to help her. The police officers immediately sprang into action, following Clara's directions back through the passage. Mr. Silva stayed with Clara, holding her tightly as they waited. Back in the basement, the police arrived just in time to intervene. They subdued Ricardo, who fought desperately but was eventually overpowered. Dona Rosa, though battered and bruised, was alive. As the police searched the house, they found overwhelming evidence of the rituals and the order's activities. Ricardo was taken away in handcuffs, his eyes filled with hatred and defeat. The truth about his dark deeds would finally come to light. Clara and Dona Rosa were reunited, both shaken but relieved. The police assured them that they would be safe now, and Mr. Silva promised to support them through the difficult times ahead. Clara and Dona Rosa were taken to a safe house, where they could begin to heal from their ordeal. The community rallied around them, offering support and love. Mr. Silva helped Clara with her schoolwork, ensuring she didn't fall behind despite the chaos. As the days passed, Clara began to feel a sense of hope. The nightmares still haunted her, but with Dona Rosa by her side, she knew she could face them. They talked about the future, making plans and dreaming of a life free from fear. One evening, Clara stood outside, looking up at the stars. She held her mother's locket in her hand, feeling its familiar weight. I'll make you proud, Mama, she whispered. I won't let the darkness win. Dona Rosa joined her, wrapping an arm around Clara's shoulders. We'll get through this, Minha querida, together. As they stood there, under the vast, starry sky, Clara felt a sense of peace. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it. With the support of those who loved her, she could overcome anything. Clara was welcomed into a warm, loving home. The Smith family, who had recently lost their daughter in a tragic accident, opened their hearts and their home to Clara. Mrs. Smith was a gentle, nurturing woman with a soft voice and a kind smile. Mr. Smith, a tall man with a firm handshake, radiated a quiet strength. As Clara settled into her new room, she felt a flicker of hope. The room was painted in soft pastels, with a cozy bed adorned with a quilt and stuffed animals. It was a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive atmosphere of her old home. Clara unpacked her few belongings, placing her mother's locket on the bedside table. Mrs. Smith knocked gently on the door. Clara, dinner is ready. We're having your favorite, spaghetti and meatballs. Clara smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. I'll be right down. As they sat around the dinner table, Clara felt a sense of belonging. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Clara began attending therapy sessions to help her deal with the trauma she had experienced. Dr. Martinez, her therapist, was a kind woman with a calming presence. In their first session, Dr. Martinez encouraged Clara to talk about her mother and the recent events. It's important to understand that what you went through was not your fault, Dr. Martinez said gently. You are very brave for facing it. Clara nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. I just miss my mom so much. And Dona Rosa, she was like family. We'll work through this together, Dr. Martinez assured her, one step at a time. Over the next few weeks, Clara slowly began to open up. She talked about her mother's kindness, the fear she felt living with Ricardo, and the bond she had with Dona Rosa. Each session was a step toward healing, helping Clara to confront and process her emotions. Anna continued to support Clara, visiting her regularly. They would sit in Clara's new room, talking about everything and nothing. Anna's unwavering support and friendship provided Clara with a sense of normalcy and stability. One sunny afternoon, they decided to go for a walk in the park. They laughed and played, momentarily forgetting the darkness that had clouded Clara's life. As they sat on a bench, Anna turned to Clara with a serious expression. You know, Clara, you're one of the bravest people I know, Anna said. I'm so proud of you. Clara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Thank you, Anna. I couldn't have done it without you. Their friendship grew stronger with each passing day, helping Clara to feel more secure and hopeful about her future. The day of the trial arrived, and Clara, along with Anna and Mr. Silva, prepared to testify against Ricardo. Clara felt a mix of fear and determination as she entered the courtroom. The atmosphere was tense, but she knew this was a crucial step toward justice. As Clara took the stand, she glanced at Ricardo, who sat with a cold, emotionless expression. She took a deep breath and recounted the horrors she had witnessed, from the rituals to the threats. Anna and Mr. Silva followed, providing their own testimonies to support Clara's account. The jury listened intently, and when the verdict was finally read, Ricardo was found guilty on multiple counts, including murder and child endangerment. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her. Justice had been served, and Ricardo would never harm anyone again. With Ricardo behind bars, Clara began to rebuild her life. She returned to school, where she participated in activities and made new friends. The once quiet girl now found joy in the simple pleasures of childhood. Clara joined the school's art club, where she discovered a love for painting. Creating colorful landscapes and whimsical scenes allowed her to express her emotions and find solace. Her art teacher, Ms. Johnson, encouraged her to explore her creativity and even entered her paintings in local art shows. One day, Clara stood before her painting of a vibrant meadow, feeling a sense of accomplishment. She had come a long way from the darkness that had once overshadowed her life. Now, she was embracing the light and rediscovering happiness. Clara knew that to fully heal, she needed to confront the memories of her mother and Dona Rosa. One afternoon, she decided to visit their graves. She brought a bouquet of flowers, placing them gently on the tombstones. As she stood there, memories flooded her mind. She remembered her mother's laughter, the stories Dona Rosa would tell her, and the love they had shared. Tears streamed down her face, but this time, they were not just tears of sorrow. They were also tears of gratitude and love. I miss you both so much, Clara whispered, but I promise to live my life in a way that honors your memory. I won't let the darkness win. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, knowing that they would always be with her in spirit. One evening, as Clara was getting ready for bed, she found her mother's locket on the bedside table. She opened it and found a small, folded note inside. Unfolding it carefully, she read her mother's handwriting. Dear Clara, always remember to be brave and kind. No matter what happens, you have the strength to overcome it. I love you forever. Mama. Clara clutched the note to her chest, feeling a surge of love and strength. Her mother's words were a reminder of the lessons she had learned and the resilience she had developed. I will be brave and kind, Mama, she whispered. I promise. Clara began to dream about her future. She wanted to help others who had gone through similar experiences. She started volunteering at a local community center, working with children who had faced trauma. Through her volunteering, Clara found a sense of purpose. She decided she wanted to become a therapist, just like Dr. Martinez, to help others heal and find hope. She worked hard in school, dedicating herself to her studies and her goal. One evening, Clara sat at her desk, planning her future. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment and excitement for the possibilities ahead. The Smith family organized a celebration for Clara's accomplishments. They invited friends, teachers, and community members who had supported Clara on her journey. The house was filled with laughter, music, and joy. Clara looked around at the smiling faces and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had come so far from the frightened girl who had cried alone in her room. Now, she was surrounded by love and support, ready to face whatever the future held. Mrs. Smith gave a heartfelt speech, praising Clara's strength and resilience. "Clara, you have shown us all what it means to be brave. We are so proud of you." Clara's eyes filled with tears as she hugged Mrs. Smith. "Thank you for giving me a home and a family." Clara stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the vast, sparkling ocean. She had come here with Anna and Mr. Silva to mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life. As the sun set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Clara felt a sense of closure and a surge of anticipation for the future. "I'm ready to help others and make a difference," Clara said, her voice filled with determination. Mr. Silva smiled proudly. "I have no doubt that you will, Clara." Anna hugged her tightly. "You're going to do amazing things." Clara looked out at the horizon, feeling the cool breeze on her face. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. With the support of her friends and the lessons she had learned, Clara was prepared to embark on a new journey of hope and transformation.